some intervention at the point of each person's creation.
Do you know about the Darwinian theory that it's about individual variation being selected? There has to be individual variation or Darwinism wouldn't work.
What also seems to be shown in the scientific evidence is that mutations die out. And we don't have good evidence of positive mutations being the ones that are then built on, because if they're a mutation, they're alone. So in order for something to rise up and have more of it, you need to have a good base to choose from. For example, a recessive gene in a person. Both parents may have brown eyes, and yet a child may have blue eyes. And that's because there's enough of the gene in their ancestors to have brought out that recessive gene.
A creationist telling an evolutionary biologist about genes, recessive genes. This is fucking hilarious.
And that's evidence against evolution?
I think that helps to show the individual nature of each person, that God created us with genes, with DNA, and that He will even use that to show His creative element in each person. The fact that you can have two people, a man and a woman, could have 13 children, 16 children, and each one is completely distinct from one another. That shows that even though they came from a common parentage, that yet there's still a creative element for each one of those human beings.
Unless they have twins, dumb fuck. Can you mind to explain that?
Do you actually know what Darwin's theory of natural selection is?
I think I know enough, because it gets pounded into us by those who simply won't allow for other information, that don't want other information to come forward.
I won't do any pounding, but just let me tell you what it is. There is individual variation. Every individual, apart from monozygotic twins, is different from every other individual. That's absolutely fundamental to the Darwinian theory. Now, what happens is that among that variety of individuals, some survive better than others, some reproduce better than others. That's how we get evolution. You couldn't have evolution unless there was individual variation. You must not keep thinking that because there's individual variation, that's somehow evidence against evolution.
So I come back to you, and why do you reject the idea that there is a creator who's involved in the creation of human beings, whether it was the initial creation and then he left, or is involved in the creation of each human being who's ever lived on Earth?
Well, as I've said, there are plenty of ways in which God could be involved in creation of the universe, in creation of life, but Darwinian natural selection demands individual variation. That's why you must stop using individual variation as evidence against evolution. It's evidence for evolution.
Once I was going through the Smithsonian Natural History Museum with dear relatives of mine, and one of them was a severely handicapped little girl who can't do anything for herself. She can't talk, she can't walk, she can't feed herself, she can barely sit up.
Oh, please don't let her use a severely handicapped little girl to make her point about how there's a loving and caring God. Please, please don't let her be that fucking stupid.
And when one of the people I was with turned to me and said, "Do you believe in evolution?" And I said, "I think this little girl is a perfect example of why evolution is wrong. Because here's someone who cannot take care of herself, and yet she has a spirit. She's not just a material being." And that's one difference I find between the ideology of Darwinism and evolution and those who believe in a loving God, is the idea of a spirit and a soul that is not material, and it's something that it makes us distinct from animals.
I'm starting to feel bad because I'm pretty convinced that this bitch is functionally retarded, and I'm not even kidding. She just doesn't seem to understand. Her arguments just go all over the place. They make no fucking sense. She's like, well, you know, I know a handicapped little girl and can't feed herself or do anything, but that proves that there's a spirit or a soul, and then from there, that's what separates us from animals, because obviously animals are just inherently evil. God created them just with no souls. You know, it's fucked up the way that you think that you know how everything was done, and yet you are so fucking stupid. You remind me of pretty much every religious person out there. They think they know exactly how it fucking happened without actually knowing jack shit and just ignoring all the facts. It's really fucking sad and infuriating, frustrating, pisses me off.
Do you think that children should be taught critical thinking at school?
In fact, that is what we argue for, is that children to be taught evidence so that they can decide for themselves, so they can figure out for themselves what is truth.
Well, see, we don't really care too much about truths around here. We care about facts, you know, evidence, actual, because a truth is only something that you can make someone else believe. If I can convince you that, you know, I'm black, and you believe it, then it's true to you, and it's the truth when I call myself, you know, the brother man. That's what I'm saying. You can only you can only deal with the facts as they are, trying not to twist them in order to form your own realities and truths like you have, Wendy.
Right. Do you understand what I was saying when I was explaining about natural selection requiring individual variation?
I do, but I also come back and I haven't heard you answer whether you have a problem with this idea of God being involved in the creation of each individual human being, not just perhaps being the one that got it all started.
So Dawkins asked her, do you understand the science that I'm trying to talk to you about right now? And she says, yes. And why do you have a problem with theism over deism? I mean, she doesn't, where's she coming from? She's out of the fucking left field. She's so fucking whacked out. Anyone else in that office that works for her should feel embarrassed. But those people are probably stupid enough that they're like, yes, they think she's doing an awesome job debating this evolutionary biologist. It's fucking pathetic.
Well, I do have a problem with that because I've seen the evidence and I know that individual variation comes from genetics, it comes from DNA, and I know where it comes from. And it's a very well worked out story. It's in every textbook. I mean, we differ because we have different genes.
And
genes. Sorry, go on.
Do you believe in a spirit or a soul?
I believe in a spirit or a soul in the sense of my own consciousness, which is a manifestation of my neurons and my brain physiology. I don't believe I have an immortal soul, no, but
Okay.
That's my personal belief.
And what about a disabled person who is severely mentally disabled and is not able to make choices? Do they have a spirit? Are they a human being?
Better yet, I've got a question for you, Wendy, right? Does a disabled person, a severely retarded person who cannot take care of themselves, would them having a soul really make up for the fact that a loving, caring God made them that way? You see, if you believe in evolution, you can say, well, you know, that occasionally you get a fuck-up, and we feel really bad for these fuck-ups, and we try and take care of them and make them as comfortable and happy as possible during their lives. However, if you believe in your loving creator, that means that your God specifically fucked that little girl up. Said, here, you know, here's a perfect human being. Wow, there you go. Fucked you up because I'm a loving creator. And what is it? Some kind of test for their parents? I mean, what kind of fucked up God do you fucking worship, you cunt? You really piss me off by bringing up a handicapped person as an example to prove your point. It's fucking sick.
They're a human being. They belong to the species Homo sapiens. Their ancestry is Homo sapiens, so of course they're human beings, yes.
And do they have a spirit or a soul?
It's not a meaningful word. I mean, they have a spirit or a soul in just the same sense as I have, but I only have a spirit or a soul in a very much different meaning than your meaning.
The way I understood you to say it, it's because of your conscious, or even your consciousness, which would be different things. But for someone, though, who is not capable of making decisions, do they have a spirit or a soul?
Well,
fuck, why are we wasting our time with these pointless fucking questions? I'm not any evolutionary biologist by any stretch of the imagination, and I am wasting my time by dealing with this. Much less Richard fucking Dawkins having to answer whether he believes in a fucking soul the same way that Wendy Wright does. So something totally unproven. You know, do you believe in the pink unicorn? Or the fucking teapot? It's all that matters is that you believe. As long as you believe the same bullshit I do, we're okay, but you believe in evidence? If you don't have faith? You don't think you have a soul? I mean, this is all retarded bullshit. Retarded, dark age bullshit that is somehow permeated through the fucking cracks of retardation and ended up with people like Wendy Wright and most other creationists.
If you mean somebody whose brain is so disabled that they have no consciousness at all, then they have no consciousness. I've answered your question.
Well, no, because a spirit or a soul is different.
That's your word. It's not a word that I acknowledge or recognize as a meaningful word.
Then from what I understand you're saying, then if someone does not have the ability to be conscious, then they would not have a spirit or soul.
A human placenta is a genetical identical twin to the baby that it nourished. I don't think either of us would wish to say that it has a spirit or a soul because it doesn't have a brain.
I would say that's a good point, but this dumb bitch would probably name her placenta.
So if only a being that has a material, well, let me back up on that. It's the material, the matter, the brain, or the consciousness. Like, well, let me back there, because those are two separate things.
Wait, let me back that up. No, let me back that up. Her poor little brain is struggling to make sense of things. Struggling, man. Chugga, 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 chugga.
Well, let me back up on that. It's the material, the matter, the brain, or the consciousness. Like, well, let me back there, because those are two separate things. I guess I'm confused in what you're saying. That a brain means you have a soul. A consciousness means you have a soul. But someone whose brain is not functioning, would they then not have a soul?
Someone who didn't have a brain that was capable of consciousness, somebody who was a human vegetable in effect, would not have the properties that you call a soul and that I might call a soul for the sake of argument, but I don't think it's immortal. That's the main difference between us.
And I think that's very key, because that then would work out in how you and I, or someone who believes like you do and someone who believes like I do, would treat someone who is in what's been called I think it's a horrible term, but a vegetative state. That we would still treat that human being as a person who's deserving of loving respect, that should be fed and cared for, even though they can't for themselves.
So what you're saying is that you think Dawkins or people that don't believe in souls would treat a handicapped person differently than you, because you think the handicapped person has a soul and was created by God that way or something. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? You're sitting there telling a man to his face that he would treat a handicapped child differently than you, simply because you disagree on whether the kid has a soul the way you define it or not. Fuck you.
How would you treat a chimpanzee who was in full command of her faculties?
Yes, and that's where we would differ. We believe that human beings have souls, have spirits, and that animals should absolutely are cared for. That's a great teaching that comes from our beliefs that we care for animals.
Take care of, sacrifice, same thing.
But we recognize that there's a difference between animals and humans, and one of the differences is a spirit.
Actually, I'm kind of surprised that the dummy could figure out that there are differences between animals and humans. She managed to figure that out, and that one of her pieces of evidence that they're different is humans have souls and animals don't. She can't really prove that, so I don't know how it's one of the main differences. I would have said something like, we use complex language, we have complex brains. On second thought, we don't all have complex brains. There are some of us that evolution seemed to have left behind. People like yourself, Mrs. Wright.